Have you ever had the feeling that your decisions aren't exactly your own? As if deep down, someone or something is pulling the strings behind your steps. That's what I felt when I started investigating a series of disappearances, all seemingly unconnected, until I realized that the victims had one thing in common. Each of them was manipulated by someone who knew exactly where they were most hurt. This case forced me to confront something that not everyone has the courage to face: fear itself. But what truly scared me wasn't the missing bodies. It was realizing that, while I was searching for the culprit, perhaps he was already watching me, or worse, inside me. This is the most intimate, most distorted, most silent investigation I've ever conducted. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're about to discover a side of the human mind that nobody wants to see. So tell me in the comments, what city or place in the world are you watching from? Maybe I've already handled a case somewhere. I don't know exactly when it all began. Maybe it was that morning when the silence seemed too heavy. Or when I realized that every case I investigated had something in common: fear. Not mine, theirs. Women disappearing without a trace, with eyes that, before vanishing, carried panic. But not just any panic. It was as if someone had pressed the right buttons inside them. The first official report was 6 months ago, but the feeling that there was something bigger behind it came long before. At first glance, the cases seemed isolated, almost random. Until I saw the pattern. They all changed their behavior before disappearing. Some began to isolate themselves, others to laugh strangely. One of them said, shortly before disappearing, that she heard wires pulling her soul. I tried to ignore it at first. I thought it was all in my head. But you can't ignore this kind of thing for long. Not when their eyes start visiting you in your dreams. Not when you find handwritten notes with phrases like, "You danced to the music too." And worst of all, in my handwriting. Since then, I've written everything down. Every detail, every whisper, every shadow. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all these years, it's that true danger doesn't shout, it whispers. And this time, it's closer than I imagined. But nothing prepared me for what I was about to discover when I followed the trail of the first victim. Her name was Amanda Torres, a university professor, 37 years old, single. She disappeared on a Tuesday, after canceling all her classes for the semester without notice. The students said she seemed fine, although she had been distracted in recent weeks. But what really caught my attention was a note in her diary. "He's back. He said he knows me inside and out." Digging deeper, I discovered that Amanda participated, 12 years ago, in a psychological experiment called Project Puppet. A secret study funded by a company that no longer exists, at least officially. It was supposed to be a test of emotional resilience. But the accounts that came to light later spoke of intense manipulation and implanted memories. And Amanda wasn't the only one. Of the 20 people who participated in the experiment, 6 have disappeared in the last 2 years. Another 4 died in circumstances considered accidental, although most left notes that basically said the same thing: "He is awake." As if they were being hunted. Or summoned. It was as if an invisible link united them all, something ancient unfinished. And now, Amanda's name had resurfaced among the quieter circles of the investigation. A kind of red flag among those who know too much. I still didn't know who he was. But the frequency with which that pronoun appeared, always capitalized, as if it were an entity, made me understand. I wasn't dealing with an ordinary criminal. And, in some way, I was part of it too. The first officially recognized victim was Julia Fernandez. She was 29 years old, worked as a child therapist, and lived alone in a small apartment downtown. She was known for being empathetic, loved by everyone, and completely functional. Nothing indicated instability, until, out of nowhere, she started missing work, locked her social media accounts, and was last seen standing in front of a shop window. Crying. Alone for no apparent reason. What disturbed me was what I found in her closet. Dozens of scribbled notes, with words repeated in a loop. Fear. 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 On another sheet, a human figure drawn with wires attached to its wrists and ankles, like a child's puppet. And right below, written in crooked letters, "He knows where it hurts." That gave me chills. Julia was trying to warn. But whom? I looked up her medical records, and to my surprise, she had consulted a psychiatrist a few days before her disappearance. According to the file, she reported feeling that someone was following her from inside her mind, and that she heard a male voice when she was alone. The doctor recommended rest and medication. But she never came back. It was as if she already knew she didn't have much time left. When I entered her apartment, I could still smell the lavender in the air. Everything was clean and organized, except for the bed, which was disheveled as if she had struggled with something invisible. And on the bedroom floor, there was a single black feather, impossible to identify. I didn't know if it was a coincidence. I only knew that it had all started with Julia, and that somehow she was still there, trying to show me something. On the third day of the investigation, I received an envelope with no return address. It was thick beige paper with a light woody scent. Inside, a single piece of paper folded in half. No signature, no date, just a handwritten phrase in handwriting too meticulous to be unintentional. Fear is the string that moves the puppets. I read it several times, trying to understand what it meant. But it was more than a threat. It seemed like a password. I showed the note to a friend who works in handwriting analysis. She examined it silently for a few minutes and finally said that the handwriting strangely resembled mine. I froze. It couldn't be. I'd never written anything like that, but the similarity was uncanny. Were they trying to send me a message? Or worse, were they trying to make me doubt my own memory? I decided to cross-reference the phrase with the content of the notes left by Julia and Amanda. And there it was. The same quote, hidden among loose words and chaotic drawings. It was a pattern. A code. But a code is only useful when you know who created it, and why. My impression was that the message was more than a warning. It was a personal provocation. Since then, I've started finding variations of that phrase in the most unlikely places. In a therapy pamphlet left on a park bench. In a social media ad. Even in instrumental music playing in the background of some random coffee shop. Always disguised, almost invisible. But present. Someone was trying to tell me that none of this was by chance. And the more I searched for answers, the more I felt like I was already part of the game. When I started cross-referencing the victims' profiles, I noticed a pattern that no one seemed to see, or perhaps no one wanted to see. All of them, without exception, showed subtle changes in behavior weeks before their disappearance. Some became more introverted, others developed strange rituals, like writing down their dreams or talking to themselves while looking in the mirror. But there was one constant. They all became afraid of the dark. It wasn't ordinary darkness. It was an almost childlike, irrational fear, as if something were hiding in the shadows, just waiting for the right moment. One of the victims even installed more than 20 light bulbs throughout the house, all turned on at the same time. Another slept with the oven on. It was as if the light was the only barrier between them and something that no one else could see, or that no one else could see. Furthermore, there were reports of spontaneous laughter, involuntary movements, and chronic insomnia. In security camera footage, I noticed something even more bizarre. At certain moments, they would stop for a few seconds and stare intently at a specific point in space, as if they were hearing an order, as if they had received a command. At those times, their bodies seemed switched off, but their eyes were too attentive. The more I analyzed the files, the more I got the impression that it wasn't just psychological manipulation. It was almost rehearsal, as if each of them was being prepared for a role they didn't know, but which they unconsciously accepted. And on this invisible stage, where the strings don't show, someone was holding the controls. The question was, who was writing this dark script? I spent entire nights trying to understand who this person was, or what they had become. Based on the evidence, I drew up a complex psychological profile. Someone with above-average intelligence, a profound understanding of human behavior, and a disturbing ability to identify emotional vulnerabilities. This manipulator didn't attack physically. They preyed on fear, shaped thoughts, rewrote memories. They were a predator of the mind. What was most curious was the pattern in which he chose his victims. He didn't seek out fragile people, but those who tried to hide their fear under a mask of strength. People who carried traumas, but had never truly confronted them. It was as if he fed on the secrets kept, the unspoken silences. The manipulation seemed to begin with something subtle. A message, a voice, a distorted memory. Gradually, everything indicated that this manipulator knew his victims intimately even before approaching them. He knew what made them back down, what paralyzed them. I found fake emails, anonymous accounts, profiles created solely to observe and provoke small reactions. He planted fear little by little, like someone cultivating a poisonous seed, until the control ceased to be psychological and became almost spiritual. But there was something more personal to it all. Some of the phrases he used were too familiar, as if they had been taken from my own field notes. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe I was looking at someone who knew my way of thinking better than I did myself. It was at that moment that I began to suspect. What if the manipulator wasn't just a criminal, but someone who had been on my side before? I decided to go beyond the official files. Some crimes don't live in police reports, they live in the subtext of the internet. In hidden forums, closed communities, and places where the truth is whispered in code. I started frequenting one of them. Free Subconscious. At first, it seemed like just another crazy conspiracy theory space. But the more I read, the more I recognized frighteningly familiar patterns in the posts. There, strangers shared experiences similar to those of the victims. Recurring dreams with puppets, a feeling of being watched, voices suggesting commands. In an old post, a user described a mental game where the winner was the one who obeyed without realizing it. The creator's name? Simply the Regent. The nickname appeared several times in different contexts, but always associated with extreme emotional manipulation. Some of the missing victims had a history of accessing this forum, including Amanda. I discovered that her login was still active, but she was posting short phrases, as if someone were using the account on purpose. Have you looked at the ceiling today? How many steps until you lose the will? He's training one more. Loose phrases, but loaded with hidden meaning. Or perhaps, a code waiting to be deciphered. That's when I noticed something. All the older accounts that talked about the Regent had been deactivated or simply deleted, as if someone was cleaning up their tracks. But I managed to download a copy of a private chat between two users. And there, amidst so many cryptic messages, one froze me. She's next. She doesn't know it yet, but she's going to dance too. The message was from 2 days earlier, and it had my name in the subject line. The file arrived anonymously, on a flash drive inside a brown envelope left at the police station's reception. No fingerprints, no camera captured the delivery person. Only the flash drive, and a word written in red marker on the back. Listen. I took it to my office, closed the curtains, took a deep breath, and pressed play. What I heard in the first few seconds took my breath away. It was Amanda's voice. She seemed nervous, but too calm for someone talking about her own fear. She said disconnected things, as if in a trance. He's here. He talks to me through the mirror. He knows my choices before I make them. Then an uncomfortable silence. Until another voice comes in. Masculine. Low. Precise. Each word seemed carefully chosen. You're afraid of failing. So fail. For me, it was hypnotic. I played this audio dozens of times, trying to identify noises, reverberations, any clue to the recording location. But it was clean. Professional. It sounded like it was made in a studio. I used frequency analysis software to try to isolate the man's voice, but the spectrogram didn't behave like regular audio. It was as if the voice had layers, hidden frequencies, like subliminal messages behind what was being said. At the end of the file, Amanda laughs. A laugh that didn't match the Amanda I saw in the home videos, nor the one I read about in the reports. It was a broken laugh, as if she had lost track of where fear ended and surrender began. I turned off the computer and stood there in silence. For the first time, I wondered if that voice spoke to me. Would I obey too? It was one of those early morning hours, one of those when your body is tired but your mind won't shut up. I was reviewing the evidence when I realized something that paralyzed me. Many of the phrases the manipulator used. I had heard them before, but not in the investigations. In my childhood, in the therapy sessions I had after my mother's death, in the dreams that had haunted me for years. It was as if he had access to my memory. In Amanda's folder, among the messy papers, I found a notebook with notes in the form of questions. Have you ever trusted too much? What was your first lie? What would you do to erase a trauma? These were questions my psychologist asked me when I was 12 years old. Questions I never shared with anyone. And yet, there they were, written with the same intonation. Exactly the same. My heart raced. I picked up my old teenage diaries, the ones I swore I'd never open again. And there were expressions, drawings, even excerpts from letters I never sent, but which I saw repeated in the victim's evidence. It didn't make sense. Unless someone had been watching me long before this investigation began. Perhaps since the very beginning of my emotional development. I didn't want to believe it, but the link was clear. The manipulator, the Regent, not only knew the victim's fears, he knew where to find mine. And now, I could no longer separate the case from my own story. Maybe I wasn't just investigating these people. Maybe I was one of them. And in this game, I no longer knew if I was a pawn or a player. After that discovery, sleep became a rare luxury. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw myself sitting on a dark stage, with invisible wires attached to my arms and legs. A faceless man, just a tall, elegant silhouette in a black suit, moved my arms as if I were a puppet. I wanted to scream, but no voice came out. And in the background, a pendulum clock counted the time. Backwards. I would wake up sweating, with a tightness in my chest. Up to that point, everything was fine, nightmares are common, right? But the problem was that marks started to appear. Small bruises on my wrists, as if something had actually held me down. Scratches on my back that I couldn't explain. I tried to convince myself it was just stress, until I found a note on the mirror written in lipstick. You dream because I let you. My mind no longer knew what was real. I started reviewing the security camera footage from my apartment, a habit I picked up after a poorly resolved case, and I saw something that made me shudder. Around 3 in the morning, I would get out of bed, walk to the living room mirror, and stand there for exactly 7 minutes. Without blinking, without moving, as if waiting for an instruction. Then I would go back to sleep. I even considered the possibility of being drugged, hypnotized, manipulated on some level I didn't yet understand. But the scariest thing was realizing that deep down part of me already expected this, as if something inside me knew the way, as if I had been trained to obey all along. And maybe, just maybe, I had been obeying for a long time. It was an old clue that led me there, an address handwritten in the diary of the doctor who coordinated the marionette project. A secluded property on the outskirts of a nearly forgotten town, where the cell phone signal died halfway there. The sign at the entrance simply read, Atlas Institute. The windows were covered in dust, but the gate was unlocked. I went in, with the feeling that the place recognized me. The interior resembled a labyrinth of mirrored rooms. Mirrors on every wall, some cracked, others covered with cloths. With each step, my reflection multiplied into dozens of versions of myself, some serious, others frighteningly distorted. On the walls, clippings from old newspapers about studies of the human mind and experimental therapies. It was as if the place still breathed what it once was, as if the echoes of the victims still lingered there. In one of the rooms, I found a leather armchair strapped to the floor, with restraints on the arms and a camera pointed directly at the face of whoever sat there. On the table, old tapes with labels written in pen. Session 03, Primal Fear. Session 07, Puppet 02. I started one of them, and what I saw paralyzed me. One of the victims crying, begging to stop. Behind the camera, a calm voice said, "Don't fight. This is to free you." But the worst was yet to come. Looking more closely at my reflection in the living room mirror, I noticed a shadow behind me. Still, tall, tilting its head slightly, as if observing an interesting experiment. I turned quickly, and there was nothing there, only the echo of my own breath. But on the fogged glass, right in the center, a fresh handprint, and it wasn't mine. The diary was hidden in a false compartment of the main desk. A leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed with time and fear. The author was Dr. Lionel Reeves, the creator of Project Puppet. His notes seemed more like confessions than scientific records. He spoke of stimulating fear until it becomes obedience, and of a mysterious individual he called Patient Zero. According to him, this man crossed the line of control and learned to command. Each page seemed more disturbing than the last. Reeves described experiments with sensory deprivation, reverse hypnosis, and the induction of false memories. The victims were convinced they were confronting their own traumas, when in reality, they were being programmed to obey. The doctor coldly recorded results, as if describing an experiment with rats. Except the rats were people, and some of them I knew by name. At one point, he writes, Zero learned too fast. Now he doesn't obey, he leads. He sees the fear of others as a musical score and plays each note until surrender. In the margins, a phrase was forcefully scratched onto the paper. If he escapes the mind, the body will follow. That gave me chills. It seemed like a desperate attempt to warn, or to confess. The doctor knew he had created something he could no longer control. Further on, a short, almost illegible note. She is the key. The one who still remembers. And the detail that took my breath away, the letter K, drawn in red next to the phrase. Katherine. My name. At that moment, I realized that the doctor wasn't just a distant observer. Somehow, he already knew me. Or worse, I had been there before, and I simply forgot. It happened on a night of light rain, when I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. The phone rang at 2:43 in the morning. On the other end, a weak, trembling, almost childlike voice. Katherine. She paused. It's me. Amanda. For a second, the air left my lungs. Amanda was dead, Or at least that's what everyone believed. The call lasted only 42 seconds, but it changed everything. She was saying incoherent things, as if she were afraid of being overheard. They see what you see. He's inside us. There was interference on the line, as if someone was trying to cut the connection. I heard breathing, footsteps, and then a muffled scream. The call dropped. I tried to trace the number, but it didn't exist. No record, no SIM card, nothing. It was as if the call had come from nowhere. Hours later, I received a voicemail on the same number. The audio was distorted, full of noise, but I could understand a phrase repeated 3 times. "Don't look in the mirror today." I froze. I ran to the bathroom and covered all the mirrors in the house with sheets. It seemed absurd, but there was something in that voice. A genuine desperation. As if Amanda knew exactly what was about to happen. Over the next few days, doors slammed shut on their own, lights flickered, and objects moved. I thought it was paranoia, until I saw Amanda's reflection for a second in the window pane. She wasn't hurt, she was just watching me. And she whispered with a half-smile, "You're next, but you can still choose the role you want to play." After that, the reflection disappeared, and the clock started ticking again. Backwards. After that night, everything I considered reality began to slowly dissolve. The voices that once came from outside now seemed to come from within. I no longer knew if I was investigating a crime, or if I was part of it. My colleagues began to notice my tiredness, my distant gaze. But how could I explain that I felt someone's presence with me all the time, even when I was alone? The mind, after all, is the perfect stage for fear to act. I began to question my own sanity. I spent sleepless days reviewing recordings, searching for evidence that would connect me to the manipulator, or that would prove he actually existed. What if it was all a collective hallucination? An experiment that never ended? Sometimes I heard a soft voice telling me, "You're doing well, keep going." And the scariest thing was, I felt comforted, almost guided. Between sips of cold coffee, I realized the line between victim and investigator was blurring. I saw the victims' faces in random places. In the reflection of a car, in the crowd, even in old family photos. It was as if they were all watching me, waiting for the moment I would admit the truth I was avoiding facing. Perhaps the regent didn't control bodies. Perhaps he controlled memories. I reached a point where I even doubted my own memories. Did all this start now, or was I just reliving something I'd already experienced and forgotten? It felt like being trapped in a cycle, an emotional loop carefully designed to break me, and rebuild me however it wanted. And for the first time, I asked myself, do I really want to discover the truth? It was during a visit to my father that everything turned upside down. We were going through old boxes in the basement when I found a folder with my name written in large letters. Inside, documents stamped confidential, photos of me as a child, and medical reports. There were neurological exams, records of hypnosis sessions, and a consent form signed by my parents. I was part of Project Puppet. I was one of the guinea pigs. The memories came in waves. I remembered that office smelling of alcohol and wood. I remembered the soft-voiced man who made me play, with strange questions, and the feeling of emptiness when leaving the sessions. At the time, they said it was therapy to deal with the trauma of losing my mother. But now I saw everything differently. That wasn't care. It was training. My entire life has been shaped by purposes I was unaware of. The psychology course, the cases I accepted, even my addiction to investigation. Everything seemed to have been placed in my path by an invisible hand. I began to wonder, what was truly my choice? And the most suffocating thing, could I still choose anything? Looking at my own story through this filter was like watching a movie where I was never the director, just the obedient character. And at the bottom of the folder, a post-it note with a single sentence made me crumble. She's ready. There was no more doubt. It wasn't just about the victims. It wasn't just about Amanda. It was about me. I was molded to get exactly to this point. I received the envelope while having coffee on the balcony. It had no return address, no stamp, just my name handwritten, and a symbol engraved on the flap, a puppet with loose strings. Inside, there was a letter typed in a serif font, spaced out, with a tone of unsettling familiarity. "Katherine, you've arrived where we expected. Now all that's left is to accept." No signature. But I knew who had written it. The regent. Or someone behind him. The letter described my decisions of the past few months with surgical precision, even those I never revealed in reports. You refused the 12th Street case out of fear. You investigated Amanda for identification. You haven't slept since your visit to the mirror. How did he know? The only possible answer chilled me. Either he was watching me, or I was telling him everything myself. Unconsciously. Programmed. At the end of the letter, a phrase stood out in bold. "You are the final piece." As if the entire chessboard had been set up to bring me to that moment. The letter wasn't threatening. There was no blackmail. It was just an observation. And an invitation. The time has come to decide whether you want to continue watching, or if you prefer to lead. It was almost kind, but kindness in that context was even more perverse. And there, sitting with that paper in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt since the beginning of the affair. A desire to run away. But run where if what was haunting me was inside me? The letter called me to something bigger, but didn't say what. It only left a question hanging. Is there still a version of you that doesn't obey? And I no longer knew the answer. The last clues led me to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone, one of those places that seem to hold secrets even in the air. The address was in an encrypted file I found on Amanda's computer, hidden under the name finalessay.mp4. It was almost too poetic to be a coincidence. I arrived there at dusk, and the first thing I noticed was the sound of classical music coming from inside. A waltz. The door was ajar. I entered with my flashlight in hand and saw dozens of mannequins hanging from steel wires, dancing slowly as the wind filtered through the gaps. In the center of the shed, a chair illuminated by a single lamp, and on it, a cassette tape with my name on it. When I pressed play, the echoing voice made me shudder. "Katherine, welcome to the final lesson." It was the same voice from the intercepted audio. The conductor. He spoke with a disturbing calm, like someone conversing with an old acquaintance. "You want answers, but you haven't realized you're in all of them. I don't control, I awaken. Every fear you investigate is just a reflection of your own." Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly and pointed the flashlight, but the beam of light only found dust. The sound of footsteps, however, continued, as if someone were walking inside the walls. The tape ended with a snap, followed by a slow breath. The music stops when the conductor understands that the audience has learned to dance on its own. And at that instant, the mannequins began to move for real, all facing me. Some fell, others spun, as if they were surrounding me. Above, a silhouette watched. A man. The conductor. But what chilled me wasn't seeing him. It was recognizing the nervous tick in his hand. It was the same as mine. I ran to the back of the warehouse, trying to reach the stairs that led to the mezzanine. The sound of footsteps followed me, synchronized with my own, as if I were the shadow and not the other way around. When I got up there, I realized the room was full of mirrors, dozens, maybe hundreds, arranged at different angles, reflecting distorted versions of myself. It was like being trapped inside my own mind. And in a way, that's exactly what it was. In the reflection, I saw the figure standing behind me. The regent. Tall, motionless, his face covered by a white mask cracked in the center. "Do you want to know who I am?" he said, in that voice that seemed to echo from within. "Look closely." I took a deep breath, approached the mirror, and for a moment the image blurred. The mask began to slowly crumble until it revealed something impossible, my own face. I was his reflection. I fell to my knees, not understanding if it was a hallucination, a trick, or the truth I had always feared. He bent down, stood at my level, and said, "I only exist because you gave me form. I am the fear you investigated so many times until you believed it had a body." And when he reached out his hand, I touched the glass, the mirror shattered, and the sound was so sharp it seemed to split the air. Fragments fell like blades in slow motion. On the floor, fragments reflected different versions of me. Child, teenager, investigator. And the puppet. Each reflection whispered something distinct, but they all said the same thing in the end. "You created the regent so you wouldn't remember what they did to you." And at that moment, I realized true control was never his. It was the trauma I imprisoned, and which was now being set free. The mirror was broken. But perhaps it was the first time I saw my own face. I returned to the car with trembling hands. The silence around me was so profound that I could hear my heart beating like a muffled drum. The warehouse was behind me, but something stayed with me. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw my reflection, too calm for someone who had just faced their own collapse. And that's when I understood. The regent was never a person. It was a pattern, a mental program built within us from the beginning. All the victims, including myself, had been conditioned to respond to certain stimuli. Words, sounds, images. Everything carefully designed to activate deep fears and guide decisions. That's why the behaviors repeated themselves. That's why the phrases appeared in random places. It wasn't a traditional persecution. It was a mass experiment, and we all danced to the tune without realizing it. I began reviewing the case recordings with this new perspective. And I realized that, at various points, even my words didn't sound like mine. It was as if I were reciting something rehearsed. Prepared phrases, predictable reactions. As if the entire investigation had been just another layer of the experiment itself, a way to test whether the control really worked on those who were supposed to fight it. And the most disturbing thing was noticing that, among all the files, there was one I'd never seen before. A video with my name in the title, dated 17 years ago. I pressed play. The image was shaky, but you could see it, me, still a child sitting in front of a camera. Behind the lens, the same soft voice. You are the key piece. When she awakens, the others will follow. The regent wasn't a person. It was a cycle. And I was trained to restart it. Today marks 7 days since I watched that video. And since then, time seems to have changed its rhythm. I received a new envelope, this time left at my door. There was no message. Just a recorder turned on, and inside my own voice repeating, Report 01, Marionette's case. The audio was this, the same one you're rehearing now. The recording didn't start today. It just continues. Looking back at everything I've collected, I can no longer distinguish what I found from what was given to me. Every clue, every note, every voice. Everything seems to have led me here. As if all along I had been following a script written within me. Sometimes I think, what if this isn't the end of the investigation, but the beginning of another stage? What if now it's my turn to lead? The strangest thing is that, since I realized this, other people have started contacting me. Ordinary people who report the same dreams, the same symbols, the same voices. It's as if the cycle has begun again, but this time, scattered in small parts around the world. The experiment hasn't ended. It has only shed its skin. Now it lives in doubts, in reflections, in the fears you haven't yet faced. And perhaps, just perhaps, upon hearing all this, you felt an inexplicable discomfort. A shiver for no reason. If that happened, it means that, in some way, you too have been touched by him. The regent. And if that's the case, tell me, do you still remember when he started speaking to you? The most dangerous type of control is the one you don't perceive. And if there's one thing this case taught me, it's that fear, when not confronted, becomes an invisible leash. Sometimes we think we're making free decisions. But deep down, we're just obeying the commands that life implanted without asking permission. The regent may not be a person, but it exists every time you remain silent in the face of your own trauma. So before you go to sleep tonight, take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself, who is pulling your hair out? If this investigation made you reflect, share it with someone who also needs to see beyond the surface. And of course, if you want to continue diving with me into this universe of psychological investigations, mysteries, and cases that defy logic, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's a lot more to be told, and maybe the next story will be yours.